2 weeks after we put Marianne in the ground, I stopped recognizing the sound of my own footsteps in this house. It wasn't grief's silence. It was the quiet of something waiting to be taken from you. I was standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, steam curling up from a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. The mug was a chipped navy blue, Father's Day gift from my grandson Jack, back when his biggest problem was losing a Little League game. Now it felt foreign in my hand, like it belonged to a man who had stopped existing the day Marianne's heart gave out. The phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't want to answer. It was probably another, "How are you, Dad?" wrapped around a hidden agenda. But I did. "Dad, we need to talk about the house," my son Adam said. His voice had that restrained impatience he'd perfected in his teens. Now, at 41, it had calcified into something colder. "Good morning to you too," I said, setting the mug down. "Let's skip the small talk. The place is too big for you. The taxes, the repairs, it's not practical. Kelly and I already found a buyer." "There's no mortgage," I said, flat, factual. Marianne and I had paid it off 7 years ago, but I'd never told the kids. Let them assume I was barely keeping up. It was easier than fighting their pity. He paused. Then came a short, sharp laugh. My laugh, but stripped of warmth. "Dad, come on. Mom's pension barely covered her prescriptions. We all know you're stretched thin." I walked to the window. Outside, the red maple we'd planted on our 10th anniversary stood bare against the winter sky. The stone path needed clearing. The raised beds in the garden still held the ghosts of last summer's tomatoes. Every inch of this yard was Marianne's handwriting in the dirt. "You worried about me?" I asked. "I'm worried about what's practical," he said, words clipped. "We could use the money from the sale. Jack's tuition isn't cheap. You'd be more comfortable downsizing." I pictured Adam at his kitchen table, laptop open, a spreadsheet labeled Dad's House, Net Proceeds, running the math the way I'd taught him when he was 8 and selling lemonade. Only now, the numbers were me. "You've been planning this for a while," I said. "That's called being responsible." I ended the call before he could start listing bullet points about my life. The phone rang again. This time it was my daughter, Claire. She had a lighter tone than her brother, but the same script. "Dad, hear me out. We've got the basement finished. Full bath, separate entrance. You could move in here. It'd be perfect." Perfect was too big a word for 4 walls below ground. "And the money from selling?" I asked. "Well, after we cover the basement work, you could help with Jack's tuition, maybe help Adam with his new place. It's all family, Dad. Win-win." Win-win. Always a rehearsed chorus between them. "When was the last time you called me to talk about something other than money?" I asked. "That's not fair," she said, defensive now. "It's been 3 months, Claire." Silence. Then, "You've been sending Jack money every month, haven't you?" "Yes, 500 for 2 years. She exhaled like I'd handed her a weapon she didn't know how to use. "He doesn't need to know that." "Of course not." If he knew, he might start questioning the story they'd been telling him about his fragile old grandfather who needed decisions made for him. I hung up. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peace, but a pause before the next blow. My feet took me to Marianne's study without asking my permission. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and her perfume, a soft floral scent that had outlived her by weeks. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it. In the bottom drawer, under old tax returns and yellowed greeting cards, my fingers found a pale green folder, heavier than it should have been. On the front, in her neat block letters, "If you're reading this, you're ready." I opened it. First came the bank statements. Accounts I'd never seen, small sums, $9,800 here, $14,300 there. Nothing flashy, but separate. Just hers. Then a deed. Not for this house. For a cabin on the edge of Flathead Lake, Montana. Purchased in her name only. 10 years ago. The letter that came with it was from a local law firm, dated 6 months before she died, confirming its current value and offering to list it. She'd written at the bottom, "Not yet. Keep private." At the back of the folder was her letter. "Tom, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm right, Adam and Claire have already started calling. They love you, but they also love control. I've watched it for years. The questions about money, the counting of what isn't theirs yet. You always give them the benefit of the doubt. I stopped doing that long ago. The house is yours. It stays yours. I paid it off so no one could take it from you, but I also knew they'd try to make you believe you couldn't manage alone. That's why I bought the cabin. It's not in your name, on purpose. If you need to disappear for a while, call the number in the back. Trust Lyle. He owes me his life. That's a story for another time. At the very back was a small brass key taped to an index card. Underneath, in her hand, "Don't fight the way they expect." I sat there until the light through the maple branches shifted from gold to gray. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief. It wasn't hope. It was resolve. If you've been with me this far, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments. And if this story has pulled you in, like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. We've got a long way to go. The morning after I opened Marianne's folder, I made a list on a yellow pad. 3 columns. What they know, what they don't, what I want them to assume. The third column was the whole game. People like Adam and Claire don't fear truth. They fear doubt. Give them enough blur and they start building their own bad maps. I brewed fresh coffee and drank it this time. The house listened. Old houses can tell the difference between a man sipping and a man pretending. I live in Worthington, just north of Columbus, on a street where maples shade more memories than cars. By 8, kids were trundling past with backpacks, and Joyce from next door, half my age, twice my nerve, was hosing salt off her porch steps. She waved. "You good?" "Getting there," I said, and meant, "The ground is starting to answer back." The first call I made was to a number in a brittle little address book Marianne kept wrapped in a rubber band. Lyle Atwood, Polson MT. Underneath, snowplow, stubborn, debt owed with a doodled star. The handwriting brought me to my knees for a second, then I stood back up inside my life and dialed. "Yeah?" The voice came like gravel on a rural road. "Is this Lyle?" I asked. "Depends who's asking." "This is Tom Rivers, Marianne's husband." Silence. Then a long exhale. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, but it came out tender. "Tom, your wife was the kind of woman a man gets one of in a lifetime if he gets any at all." "She said you'd understand," I said. "About a place on Flathead." "I understand everything that matters," he said. "You coming or just checking the lock?" "I might need the place made ready, quietly," I said. "Say the word. I'll have the chimney swept, pipes bled, sheets fresh. You tell me when you want the heat on. And Tom?" "Yeah?" "I owe Marianne infinity. That debt doesn't retire." "How'd she earn it?" I asked before I could stop myself. "When you get here, I'll tell you about a February, a frozen truck, and a woman who didn't know how to quit," he said. "Not a phone story." We hung up with nothing performative. I stood in the kitchen staring at the back door until the cold came through the glass and made a small argument with my bones. The second call was to a woman named Denise Porter, a probate attorney I'd met once at a Rotary breakfast. She ran a little firm off North High Street near an old bank-turned-wedding venue. When she answered, she kept it simple. "Mr. Rivers, Tom, my condolences. Come in this afternoon? Bring whatever Marianne left for you." I told her I would. After I hung up, I changed my shirt. Grief had taught me sweatpants as armor, but paperwork prefers buttons. By late morning, I needed a task with splinters. I oiled the hinges on the side door until they stopped complaining, tightened screws on the banister, swapped the batteries in the smoke detectors. The little nonsense of maintenance lowers a man's blood pressure worse than the medication ever did. Marianne used to say you can't control a storm, but you can put away loose chairs. At noon, I drove to the Worthington post office and rented a P.O. box. The clerk, a woman with a tattoo of a tiny airplane on her wrist, didn't ask questions she didn't need answers to. "Smallest size?" she asked. "Medium," I said, and took the 2 keys like a blessing. On the way home, I stopped by Walnut Grove Cemetery. I didn't bring flowers. Marianne was allergic to fuss. Her name on the stone still felt like a typo. I stood there with my hands in my coat pockets and said nothing until the wind moved the flags in the veterans section like a soft applause. "They're circling," I said finally. "They smell inheritance and think it's oxygen. I'm not letting our house become a line item in someone's responsible planning." The air didn't answer, which is how you know it's telling the truth. Denise's office still had the vault door in the lobby from its bank life, a decorative reminder that once we put value behind steel instead of screens. Her receptionist offered water in a way that didn't make refusal feel rude. When Denise came out, she didn't hug me. I liked her immediately. We sat in a conference room with a table the color of old cigars. I set the folder between us and felt squeezed by the urge to apologize to the paper for scarring it with my fingers. I didn't. "She anticipated," Denise said, flipping through neatly. She made notes with a pencil, not a pen. The soft scratch made my pulse steady. "She did more than that," I said. "She bought me a way to not be managed." Denise lifted the deed to the Montana cabin. "Title is in her name alone. We can establish your rights as surviving spouse." Was that the intention? If the intention was that I can walk into that cabin and close the door behind me without explaining myself to anyone, yes. "We'll work with counsel up there," she said. "I know a firm in Missoula that respects the concept of a private life." She slid me a form with the words "Notice of Non-Representation" across the top. "Sign, and I'll send this to every realtor who tries to turn your porch into a showroom. It states clearly you haven't authorized any person to list or solicit offers on your property, and that any such claim is fraudulent." I read it. I liked how unexcited the sentences were. "Second," she went on, "cease and desist to any agent or buyer who's been given the impression your children can sell your house on your behalf. We file notice with the county recorder too. It's housekeeping, but it's a broom with teeth. And my kids? Adult children bless you and test you," she said. "They don't get keys they weren't handed. If either of them is threatening conservatorship, we let them discover the downside of false alarms. Ohio's judges are practical. If you can quote your property taxes without blinking, you're not going to be a ward of anyone." I signed what needed signing. We addressed envelopes. Watching postage stick to the world felt better than revenge. Procedure doesn't love you, but it can protect you if you ask politely. Back at home, I dropped the carbon copies into the bottom drawer of my desk, not Mary Ann's, and locked the drawer. The lock answered like it had missed being used. By 4, Adam called. I did not put him on speaker. Some men do their worst when they think they have a stage. "Dad, what was that letter Greg got? He says your lawyer threatened him." "It wasn't a threat," I said. "It was a boundary written in boring fonts." "Come on," he said. "We found a buyer. Contract's solid. Don't make this a thing." "You've been making it a thing," I said. "For weeks. I've been letting you exhaust yourself." "You're being unreasonable," he snapped. "I am being precise. Thursday, 2 o'clock, my kitchen table. Bring your attorney. Claire's invited. We'll talk once like adults, and then we won't talk about it again." "You can't dictate terms," he said. "I just did," I said, and ended the call without apology. I slept in Mary Ann's study that night. The couch was too firm, the pillow too flat. Everything was wrong except the smell, lemon oil, and her ghost of perfume. Somewhere around midnight, a fox moved through the dark and stepped on the motion light, and for 5 dumb seconds, I thought the universe was coming up the walk to shake my hand. In the morning, I changed the deadbolt on the front door. Not because I'm afraid, because I like a lock that knows my name. At 9 sharp, I called a moving company owned by a woman named Connie Buck. We'd used her once when Claire thought she wanted to live in Chicago and then didn't. "Connie's Cartage," she said, businesslike, unamused. "Connie, this is Tom Rivers on Orchard Drive." "Mary Ann's Tom," she said, then softened. "I'm sorry. I need 2 drop-offs," I said. "Marked boxes delivered to 2 addresses. No mess, no mystery. Just signatures and timestamps. Today if you can." "You've got me between a church and a dentist at 3, she said. "I can hit the first by 7:30 if you don't mind my boys lifting at sunrise." "Sunrise is when the truth likes to start work," I said. "Be here at 7. I spent the afternoon in the rooms that no longer needed to pretend they belonged to my children. Markers and tape. A Sharpie is a truth serum if you let it be. Adam's old room. A stack of baseball trophies, high school yearbooks, a leather belt that always thought it was the personality. Claire's. A box of sheet music she never practiced. Scarves tied to hangers like promises. A shoebox labeled Paris that contained 4 postcards and a receipt for croissants from a place on 5th. I could have told her was a tourist trap. I put the postcards back on top because memory is not evidence, but it is an exhibit. With each box, I wrote in clean block letters, Adam, personal, Claire, keep. I tucked a letter on top of each stack. The words were plain, not mean. Returning what is yours, keeping what is mine. Love, Dad. No love on Adam's, not from spite, from accuracy. Connie rolled up at 7:04 with 2 guys in wool hats and a truck that had earned its scars. She wore fingerless gloves and a look that said she'd hauled more than furniture for people. "You sure?" she asked, eyes on the boxes with their names written loud. "Let's teach gravity to take their things home," I said. Her guys moved like men who had learned not to rush for show. I signed Connie's tablet and double-checked that my address and theirs were typed like an oath. She grunted approval at the labels. "We'll get signatures or time-stamped photos if they bolt," she said. "I'll text you both either way." When the truck pulled away, the house didn't echo, it breathed. By 8, a photo hit my phone. Adam's porch, boxes stacked neat, my letter on top. The timestamp looked like a court that didn't have to put on a robe. A minute later, another. Claire's stoop, the box labeled music, glancing sunlight like it had waited for this exact morning. Connie added a single period to each text. Punctuation from a professional. At 8:20 the bell rang. The knock sounded like a man testing the species of wood. Adam's knuckles. I left the chain on. "You're unbelievable," he said when I opened the door a safe width. He held up his phone to show me his own porch-like evidence. "What is this?" "A return," I said. "We're clearing up who keeps what." "You think that proves something?" His mouth did a teenage thing it hadn't done in 20 years. "You want to humiliate me? I want my house to be the place where my life happens, not your storage unit and not a piggy bank." "You're going senile," he said, soft with rage. "See you at 2 on Thursday," I said, and pushed the door closed. The chain made a small sound that felt like grammar. He drove off fast enough for the street to roll its eyes. At 9:05, Claire called. "Dad, why? Why would you do this? The music." "You wrote that you wanted to be the person who brings things to the table," I said. "Start with carrying your own things to your car." "That's cruel." "It's clarifying." I let her sit with it. She didn't hang up. Neither did I. Finally, she said, very small, "I'm sorry about telling Jack I was paying for everything." "Make the apology to him," I said. "Not to me." "I will," she said, and it sounded like a piano key finally struck with the right pressure. I took a walk around the block to cool the part of me that enjoyed any of this more than it should. There's a difference between justice and scorekeeping. I repaired the difference with cold air and a hat. In the afternoon, Denise's assistant emailed me PDFs, stamped and scanned. Copies of her letters to the buyer, to the county recorder, to a brokerage I recognized from Adam's breathless texts. The subject lines were sleepy. I loved them for it. While the world loves drama, the world obeys forms. Around 5, I drove to the hardware store off High. I bought a code lock safe no bigger than a shoebox because originals are precious, but well-placed copies can keep you alive. I bought 3 padlocks, 2 spare keys cut on the machine that whines like an annoyed bee, and a roll of contractor bags because sometimes trash deserves dignity. Back home, I set the new safe on the top shelf of the hall closet behind a row of snow boots because nobody lifts boots when they're snooping. I put in it a photocopy of the cabin deed, Denise's notice letters, Marianne's letter, and the little brass key on its index card. The routine felt a little like prayer and a lot like sobriety. At 7:42, my phone buzzed with a new number. "Greg, Buckeye Realty." I didn't answer. He left a voicemail you could smell through the phone. "Mr. Rivers, Big misunderstanding, your son said. Let's talk. Hot market. Best number you'll ever see. I sent it to Denise and typed the subject line, "For your file." She replied with a thumbs up. I forgave her the emoji because she'd earned an imprecision or two. The next morning, I did the small things Marianne had taught me create clarity. I labeled the breaker box with real words, not guesses. I fixed the sloppy caulk line at the kitchen sink where water had been rehearsing its rebellion. I sharpened the pruning shears even though there was nothing yet to cut. It's good to have a sharp thing in the house that's useful and not metaphorical. By 11, Joyce knocked. She held a Tupperware with lasagna written all over it. I made a pan. "I made 2 pans," she said, awkward in the doorway, as if grief had a dress code she'd underpacked for. "I'll eat what the day doesn't steal from me," I said, taking it. "If you need someone to keep an eye on the mail," she offered. "I'm nosy enough." "I was going to ask," I said. "Keys will be in an envelope with your name on it. If you see anybody on my porch in a suit, take a picture and tell them our dog bites." "You don't have a dog," she said. "News to them," I said. For lunch, I sat at the kitchen table and ate Joyce's lasagna too hot. The burn reminded me I could still feel joy and not just anger. I drafted 2 emails, one to Denise authorizing her to be my wall for a week, one to Lyle with the dates I'd be arriving. On the second, my fingers hesitated on the send key like a man at a pool's edge hearing his mother's voice about waiting 30 minutes after eating. That evening, when the house sank into its winter hush, I took the blue folder and set it on the desk next to the new safe. Then I opened a different drawer I hadn't touched in years, an old metal box with a latch that bites. Inside, letters I'd written to Marianne when we were young enough to mistake love for a fire that doesn't need kindling. I read one and put it back. I didn't need a past tense love to pump blood for me anymore. I needed a present tense plan. Thursday came gray and cold. 2 minutes before 2, Denise arrived with a leather folio and the face of a woman who knows how to hand a man dignity without writing it on an invoice. "You ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said, more than any other day since she left. At 2:01, Adam and Claire walked in without knocking. Adam had a man with him whose hairline cost good money. "This is Nathan," Adam said, "our attorney." He glanced at Denise's folio and immediately didn't like the equal weight of it. We didn't shake hands. We sat. I poured coffee like a farmer, black and without rhetorical devices. Adam didn't take any. Claire did. Nathan asked for water, which is lawyer for, "I'm about to try reason and I want you to see me as a person." "Let's get to it," Adam said. "We have an offer, above market, contingencies removed. We should take it." "We won't," I said. "It's not about you," he said, already losing the room. "It's about safety, taxes." "Stop," I said. "Just once, listen to the words you're saying. It's not about you. To a man sitting in his own kitchen about the house he paid for with a woman you loved, the same way you love a number in a spreadsheet." "You're being dramatic," Nathan cut in. He had a smooth voice that would have made him a star if he'd found radio in 1973. "Let's focus on facts." "Fine," I said. "Here's a fact." I pushed a single piece of paper across the table. Denise's letterhead looked boring on purpose. "No one is authorized to list this property for sale except me. Anyone contacting you otherwise is acting without authority. Here's another fact." I nodded at the other stack, Denise's county filing, a little crabbed stamp in the corner, announcing to the world that a boundary had been recorded in the language courthouses like, "We are done entertaining the fiction that you can sell a house you don't own." Adam's jaw did that small arc it did when he was 7, and his bat felt heavier than his pride. "If you won't be reasonable, we can petition the court. You're alone. You're making risky choices. You're hearing yourself threaten guardianship in a stranger's voice," I said. "Say it in yours and tell me if it still tastes like policy or if it starts tasting like shame." Nathan shifted. "No one is threatening guardianship," he said, choosing a less radioactive word. "We're exploring options." "Here's my option," I said. "When I choose to leave this house, I'll tell you. Not to ask permission, to give you the courtesy of knowing what my life looks like. Until then, The only conversations we have will be about things that still belong to both sides of this table, like your son and my grandson." Claire set her cup down and stared into the brown circle like she could read the future in its cooling. "Dad, I'm sorry about the money," she said, more to the room than to me, "about telling Jack it was us. You told him a story you liked better than the truth," I said. "You can fix that." Adam smiled without humor, which is a family trick we should have left to die in the 90s. "Congratulations, you won," he said. "This isn't a game," I said. "Everything is," he snapped. "Then learn different rules," I said. "They start with listening." I slid a single index card toward them, the one I'd rewritten 3 times so I wouldn't enjoy it too much. It said, 3 understandings. 1. My home is not for sale. 2. I am not moving into your basement. 3. Any financial support for Jack goes directly to Jack. Interference ends it. Adam leaned back. Claire closed her eyes like a person letting the ocean crash one more time before admitting she loves the sound. Nathan stacked his papers carefully. "We'll take this under advisement," he said, which in lawyerese can mean anything between "we'll sue you" and "we'll go scream in the parking lot." "Do that," Denise said, calm enough to be paid well. They stood. Adam took a step toward me like muscle memory was asking for a different conversation, then thought better of it. They left the way people exit a room they thought they owned. 2 minutes after they drove off, my phone buzzed. "Unknown, Polson MT. "This is Lyle," the voice said. "Chimney's clean, the bed's made. There is ice on the steps, but I put down sand. There's a stack of wood that will take a match like it's part of the family." "What do you want for your trouble?" I asked. "You carried something once for someone I couldn't lift," he said. "This is interest." He paused. "You got a good road ahead if you don't let other folks pick the turnoffs." I hung up and stood in the doorway between Marianne's study and the hallway. The light fell across the desk at the same angle it did every winter at 4, and for a second I felt something like a hand on my shoulder that didn't weigh anything. I went to the kitchen and wrote at the bottom of my yellow pad, "Leave when the house is ready to miss you, not when you're ready to run." That night I packed a small bag and set it open on the guest bed. Socks that don't judge, 2 shirts that don't pretend to be younger than I am, the shaving kit Marianne liked because it made me smell like cedar. I tucked the little brass key under the lining, not because anyone would find it here, but because it felt good to put something into a pocket on purpose. Before I slept, I called Jack. He answered on the second ring the way a good kid does when he hasn't learned yet to damage what calls him. "Grandpa?" "Hey, bud," I said. "How's school?" "Senior year's scary," he said. "But less scary when I remember you always helped me with fractions even when I cried about it." I laughed. "Fractions are rude," I said. "Mom told me the money," he said, voice wobbling a little, "that it was you." "It was us," I said. "Your grandmother and me." "I didn't know how to say thanks," he said. "You just did," I said. "Listen, if anyone starts telling you stories about my house, remember, I'm still the man who makes a mean omelet and knows where the snow shovel lives." "I know," he said. "I love you." "I love you too," I said, and didn't tell him that love is sometimes a boundary with a softness you feel only when you run into it and realize it didn't cut you. I slept better than I had since the funeral. Dreamed of maples with leaves and a lake that held a small white cabin like it knew its job was to keep. In the morning, the house was the right temperature for what I had to do next. 2 days after the showdown at my kitchen table, I woke before the sun. The air had that metallic chill that makes you think of tools, not people. I brewed coffee strong enough to stand up without help and sat in Marianne's study with the brass key on the desk in front of me. It was smaller than I remembered. Lyle had said there was ice on the cabin steps, but my mind kept skipping past that to the sound of wood popping in the stove. I wasn't running away. I was moving toward something she'd built for me without telling me, which was its own kind of love letter. I needed a pretext to leave Ohio that wouldn't light up Adam's suspicion like a neon open sign, so I started with the most boring one I could think of: medical. Dr. Blanchard's office is 2 blocks from the Kroger on High Street, in a squat brick building that smells faintly of antiseptic and patience. He's a man who believes in preventative medicine, but also in the human right to fudge your weight on the intake form. I told him I needed a break, somewhere quiet, somewhere my blood pressure wouldn't have to fight with doorbells. He didn't ask for proof. My numbers told their own story. He wrote me a referral for restorative travel to reduce stress. That's the kind of phrase that sounds official enough for nosy relatives, but vague enough to keep the destination in my pocket. On the way home, I stopped at Schmidt's Sausage House in German Village. Marianne and I used to split a Bahama Mama and a cream puff so big you could hide a love note in it. I ate alone at a small table near the window, watching tourists take selfies under the old neon sign. You don't realize how much being part of a we shields you from being seen as a just you until the other half is gone. Back home, I started making lists again. This time, cabin essentials, cabin risks, cabin maybes. Under essentials, I wrote chains for tires, wool socks, bourbon. Under risks, snowdrift blocking the drive, mail piling up here in Ohio, Adam showing up with a locksmith. Under maybes, inviting Jack for a week in spring, telling Claire where I was if she asked the right way. Joyce caught me in the driveway that afternoon. "You're up to something," she said, arms folded. "You've got that look." "What look is that?" I asked. "The one you had before you built that deck without a permit in '92, she said, smirking. "Just remember, secrets have a half-life in this neighborhood." "I'll risk the decay," I said. That night I called Lyle again. "I'm thinking of coming out sooner than planned," I told him. "You got a vehicle that can eat a mountain?" he asked. "I've got an F-150 that still thinks it's 30, I said. "Good, drive it. Flying puts you on lists. Driving makes you scenery." We set a date, 2 weeks from today. Enough time to make the house look lived in without actually living in it. Enough time to create decoys. The next morning, I went to the bank. I didn't touch the accounts Adam knew about. Instead, I took $4,000 from the one Marianne had left in her name with me as the beneficiary. I asked for it in hundreds, crisp enough to feel like paper pretending to be cloth. The teller didn't blink. Maybe she'd seen people withdraw stranger things than a man's quiet exit. I bought timers for the lamps, new curtains for the front room, thicker so you couldn't see the absence. I scheduled a gutter cleaning for the week I'd be gone, because nothing says occupied like someone on a ladder in your yard. On Thursday, Claire called. Not about the house, about Jack. "He wants to see you before you leave," she said. "Who told him I'm leaving?" I asked. "He guessed," she said. "He's smarter than we deserve." We met at a diner off Route 23, the kind with Formica tables and a dessert case older than most of the waitstaff. Jack slid into the booth across from me, lanky now, but with the same cowlick he'd had at 5. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Somewhere with fewer voices in my head," I said. "Montana?" he asked. I didn't answer. He grinned. "You always told me never to bluff with a bad hand." "I also told you never to say the quiet part out loud in public," I said. We ate pancakes and talked about nothing. His math teacher's obsession with 19th century bridges, my neighbor's dog that refuses to bark at delivery drivers but loses its mind over squirrels. When we stood to leave, he hugged me longer than he ever had. "Don't disappear," he said into my shoulder. "I'm not disappearing," I said. "I'm just not letting other people draw my map anymore." That night, I pulled Marianne's letter from the folder and read it again. This time I noticed something I'd skimmed before. Don't fight the way they expect. I'd been thinking that meant legal filings and quiet defiance. But maybe it also meant not telling them what mattered until it was too late for them to ruin it. The next day, I started packing for real. Not just clothes, documents, spare truck keys, the kind of tools you don't lend out. I taped the brass key to the inside of my shaving kit behind the zipper. I told Joyce I'd be gone for a while, and asked her to keep the driveway clear if it snowed. She didn't ask for more. That's worth more than friendship. That's trust with a shovel. By Sunday, the house felt like it knew. The maple outside rattled its bare branches like it was practicing applause. I checked the timers twice. Then I sat in Marianne's study one last evening, letting the lemon polish air wrap around me, and said out loud, "We're still a we, you know." The room didn't answer, but I swear the key caught the light in a way that meant, go. The morning I left Worthington, the streetlights were still on. The house sat behind me like a witness who'd agreed to keep its mouth shut. I'd parked the truck facing south the night before so I could roll out without the engine flashing in Adam's dreams. The air smelled like wet concrete and dead leaves. I tossed my bag in the cab, slid the brass key into the console, and set the old blue folder under the seat. The safe in the closet now held only decoys, photocopies of irrelevant bank statements, a grocery list from 2014. If Adam broke in, I wanted him to think he'd hit the jackpot while holding a pocket full of Monopoly money. I drove north before heading west. It wasn't efficient, but efficiency gets you spotted. I took 71 to 270, then west on 70, blending into the morning commute until Columbus was a rear-view suggestion. By the time I hit Indiana, the sun was a thin coin trying to buy the day. I stopped at a gas station outside Richmond, grabbed a coffee that tasted like its own punishment, and checked my phone. One missed call from Adam. No voicemail. That was worse than anger. It was planning. I texted Joyce. All good. Mail? Her reply came quick. Nothing but catalogs. Drive safe. Somewhere past Indianapolis, a black SUV tailed me for a few miles. Could have been nothing. Most things are. But when it changed lanes every time I did, I eased off the gas and took an exit toward a diner called Lou's Grill. The SUV kept going. Paranoia is like salt. A pinch keeps you alive. A handful ruins the meal. At Lou's, I sat at the counter, ordered eggs over easy, and let the sound of plates on metal calm me. The waitress had a name tag that said Sherrill in faded Sharpie. "Where you headed?" she asked. "Montana," I said without thinking. "Big sky," she said. "Good for the lungs." The road past Illinois felt longer, flatter, like it was daring me to fall asleep. I kept the window cracked to let cold air bite my cheek. Somewhere outside Des Moines, I called Lyle. "Still coming?" he asked. "Halfway there. You'll see the mountains before you're ready," he said. "They change the scale of your thoughts." That night I stayed at a motel in Sioux Falls, the kind with a door you can open straight to the outside if you need to. The carpet smelled faintly of cigarettes and cleaner, but the deadbolt worked. I placed a chair under the knob out of habit, not fear. In the morning, there was a voicemail from Claire. Her voice was careful. "Dad, I don't know where you are, but I hope it's somewhere good. Jack says you'll call when you're ready. Take your time." No ask about the house. No dig about money. Just space. The next stretch, South Dakota into Wyoming, was where the road felt like it was thinning out behind me. Towns were farther apart, gas stations rarer, sky getting taller by the mile. I stopped in a place called Wall, where the billboards had been advertising free ice water for 50 miles. I took the water. I bought a knife from a dusty rack because it felt wrong to travel into mountains without one. By the time I crossed into Montana, the truck's cab smelled like coffee, leather, and the faint metallic edge of anticipation. Snow had been pushed to the sides of the road in crusted ridges. Mountains rose ahead, blue-gray and bigger than any argument. Polson appeared at the edge of Flathead Lake like a postcard that had been waiting for me to open it. The water was dark glass, the sky reflected in it like it had been carefully set there. Lyle met me at a gas station just off the highway, his truck idling, dog in the passenger seat. "You made it," he said, shaking my hand like it was sealing something. "I did. Let's get you to your place." The cabin sat on a slight hill, wood darkened by weather, smoke already curling from the chimney. Inside, it smelled like cedar and something baking, though I saw no oven in use. The stove was lit, logs crackling like they'd been waiting for me. On the table, Lyle had left a folded map, a set of keys, and a single envelope. "From her," he said. "She made me swear to wait until you got here." I held it for a second before opening. "Tom, if you've reached this place, you're exactly where you're meant to be. This is not a hiding place. It's a starting line. Use it. And remember, the people who try to own you will never understand the ones who simply give." I set the letter down, looked out at the lake, and felt the weight shift, not vanish, but settle into a place I could carry. The first morning in the cabin, I woke to the sound of the stove breathing. Outside, the world was white and still, the kind of stillness that feels like it's listening to you. Flathead Lake lay below, a sheet of dark glass under a sky so clear it looked polished. Lyle had been right. The mountains change the scale of your thoughts. The worries that had crowded me in Ohio now seemed smaller, like coins scattered across a wide table. I brewed coffee on the stovetop, the kind that makes the cabin smell like it's been awake longer than you have. Lyle arrived just after sunrise, his boots knocking snow from the steps. He carried a sack of groceries and a thermos under one arm. "Got your basics: eggs, bread, bacon," he said, setting them down. "And a few things Marianne told me you'd pretend you didn't want but always use. Duct tape, batteries, WD-40. "She knew me," I said. "Better than most men let themselves be known," he said. He poured coffee into 2 enamel mugs, took a long sip, and sat across from me. "You said you owed her," I reminded him. He leaned back, the chair creaking. It was February 15 years ago. Storm hit hard. I was plowing County Road 7 trying to get a stranded family out before the cold did. My truck hit a drift and buried itself. Engine quit. Wind chill was 30 below. Thought that was it for me. And Marianne? She was driving back from Missoula, saw my hazard lights, stopped without thinking. Most folks wouldn't have in that weather. She had chains in the trunk, a thermos of coffee, and a tongue sharp enough to keep me awake while we worked. Took us 3 hours to dig out, but she wouldn't leave me. He paused. She told me later she'd been in a worse storm once. Lost a friend because no one stopped. Said she wasn't going to let the same thing happen twice. I pictured her there, scarf whipping in the wind, cheeks red from cold and defiance. That was Marianne. Rescue first, questions later. "You don't forget the person who keeps you in the world," Lyle said quietly. We spent the morning stacking wood and clearing a path to the shed. By noon, the sun had that weak winter warmth that tricks you into taking off your gloves before you should. Inside, I unpacked what I'd brought: the brass key, Marianne's letter, my yellow pad of lists. I put them on the desk in the corner by the window that faced the lake. That's when I noticed something odd. The phone on the wall, not a cell but a landline, had its cord neatly coiled, like it hadn't been used in months. But the light on the base was blinking. I picked it up. One message. A voice I knew too well. "Dad, I'm not mad. I just need to know you're okay. Call me." Adam's tone was softer than it had been in months. That didn't mean much. My son could layer concern over strategy like a mason laying brick. I deleted the message without saving it. That evening, Lyle came back with 2 folding chairs. "Ice fishing tomorrow if you're game," he said. "I came here to be quiet, not frozen solid," I said. "You can be both," he grinned. We sat on the porch as the sun dropped behind the mountains, the lake shifting from silver to black. Lyle handed me a small brown envelope. "Marianne gave me this a week before she died. Said you'd need it when you were ready." Inside was a Polaroid, Marianne standing right where I was now, hair whipping in the wind, smiling like she'd stolen something worth keeping. On the back she'd written, "This is yours now. Don't waste it hiding." That night, I built a fire big enough to make the cabin glow. I thought about Adam's message, about how absence makes some people curious and others dangerous. I thought about the map Lyle had left me, routes through the back roads if I ever needed to move unseen. And I thought about Marianne, in storms and in stillness, always pointing me toward somewhere I hadn't realized I needed to be. 3 days into my Montana life, I learned the sound of the lake at night. It's not silent. It groans under ice, shifts like an animal in its sleep. Some cracks echo like rifle fire, others whisper under your boots if you're fool enough to walk where you shouldn't. Lyle came by with a 5-gallon bucket of trout and a warning. "Your son's been making calls." I raised an eyebrow. "How do you know?" "Guy at the Polson post office is my cousin. Says Adam called asking if anyone had seen a Tom Rivers picking up packages. He even tried to describe you. Mid-60s, stubborn face." Lyle smirked. "My cousin told him no such man exists here." That night I sat at the cabin desk and wrote in my yellow pad, "Adam's strategy. Use strangers' curiosity. counter-chuncher, give them boredom. I kept the phone off the hook for most of the day, leaving a busy signal for anyone who tried. But trouble doesn't always knock through the front door. On Thursday, I drove into town for supplies, flour, coffee, a new axe handle, and noticed a rental car idling near the corner of Main and 3rd. A man in a parka sat behind the wheel, pretending to scroll his phone but glancing up every time someone came out of the hardware store. Could have been nothing. But the part of me that had learned to survive in a house full of other people's plans didn't think so. I loaded my truck slow, keeping my back to him, then drove out toward the lake's far side, taking the long way home. 10 minutes later, I checked the rear view. Nothing but road and snow. That evening, Lyle stopped by with 2 beers and a question. "You ready to hear the rest of the storm story?" I nodded. "Your wife didn't just pull me out," he said. "She kept coming back, checked on me for a week, fixed my wood stove when she saw it smoking wrong, brought groceries. That's the kind of help that embarrasses you into living better. I sold my snowplow 2 years later and bought this place. Haven't been stuck since." We sat in the glow of the stove, the beers sweating on the table. I didn't tell him about the man in the parka. Not yet. The next morning, the cabin mailbox, half buried in snow, held an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one sentence. "You can't stay off the map forever." I burned it in the stove without showing Lyle. I didn't need him thinking Montana was about to turn into Ohio with mountains. Instead, I doubled down on routine. Morning coffee, wood stacking, long walks along the frozen shoreline. I spoke to as few people as possible, bought everything in cash, and left the truck parked at the far end of the lot when I went into town. But one thing about living this far out, news still moves. The feed store owner told me Adam had called him too, asking about an older man buying chains and fuel stabilizer. The owner claimed he didn't know anyone like that. I thanked him without explaining. That night I set the Polaroid of Marianne on the mantel and told her out loud, "They're sniffing, but they don't know what they're looking for yet." The stove popped and I let myself believe she approved. It was the wind that woke me that morning, not a soft whistle through the eaves, but a long, low moan that made the cabin feel like it was remembering every winter it had ever survived. I put on coffee, fed the stove, and stepped out onto the porch. Down by the lake, a set of fresh tire tracks curved in from the road and stopped 20 feet from the cabin. No footprints. Whoever it was had come in the night, looked, and left. Lyle showed up mid-morning with a bag of nails and a face like he'd bitten a lie. "Your boy's here," he said. "Here is in town. Here is in ask the gas station where the man with the Ohio plates lives." I sat down hard, and "My cousin told him everyone minds their own business around here," Lyle said. "But Adam's the type who hears that as an invitation to keep digging." By noon the wind had died, but my stomach hadn't. I drove into Polson under the pretext of needing salt for the porch steps. That's where I saw him, Adam, standing outside the hardware store, talking to a man I recognized as the feed store owner. He hadn't seen me yet. I turned down a side street, parked behind a line of snow-covered trucks, and walked back on foot. Close enough to hear, I caught the tail end of his pitch. "Just want to make sure he's not out here alone without help. You know how winter can be." The feed store owner shrugged. "Folks out here are tougher than they look." I slipped away before Adam could turn and spot me. My breath felt loud in the cold air. Back at the cabin, I sat at the desk with Marianne's Polaroid in front of me. Don't fight the way they expect. That meant no door-slamming showdown, no raised voices. When Lyle stopped by that evening, I asked, "You ever play chess?" "Poorly," he said. "Good. I'm thinking about a game where the goal isn't to win, but to keep the other player chasing pieces they can't catch." He grinned. "I can help with that." The next day, I left the truck parked in town in front of the diner all morning while Lyle drove me up into the hills to a friend's place. We spent the day splitting wood and drinking coffee so strong it made my teeth hum. If Adam asked around, he'd get 2 answers. Yes, they'd seen my truck. And no, I wasn't there. That night, as the fire settled into embers, I realized Adam wasn't here to talk about the house anymore. He was here to take inventory. Of me, of what I had, of where I could be pushed. And I decided, quietly and without ceremony, that he'd leave Montana with less than he came for. 2 mornings after I spotted Adam in town, the lake went perfectly still. No wind, no groaning ice, just a flat expanse that looked like you could walk across it to a different life. That kind of calm always feels like it's hiding something. I'd just set the coffee to brew when Lyle's truck crunched up the drive faster than usual. He didn't even kill the engine before leaning out. "He's on his way," he said. "I saw him leave the motel 10 minutes ago, heading this direction. No bags in his hand, just intent." I looked around the cabin. Too many signs of me here. My boots by the stove, the yellow pad on the desk, Marianne's Polaroid on the mantel. "How much time?" I asked. 5 minutes, maybe 6 if he doesn't trust his tires," Lyle said. I grabbed the Polaroid, the yellow pad, and the brass key, shoved them into my duffel, and stepped out onto the porch. Lyle was already moving. "Get in," he said. We took the back trail, a single-lane track cut through trees, snow still hanging heavy on the pines. It looped around to the old fire road and down toward the far end of the lake. My truck stayed parked in front of the cabin, looking like I was still inside. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Buddy of mine has a workshop by the marina. You can sit there with a coffee and watch the boats freeze while your son talks to an empty room." Sure enough, from the workshop window, we saw Adam's rental pull up to the cabin 20 minutes later. He sat in the driver's seat for a full minute, then got out, walked up to the porch, and knocked. From where we were, it looked like a man knocking on a locked memory. He circled the cabin once, peered in a window, then returned to his car. Before he left, he pulled out his phone, took a picture of the cabin, and stood there staring at it like he was waiting for it to explain itself. "Persistent," Lyle said. "He comes by it honest," I said. By afternoon, Adam was back in town. I saw his rental outside the diner when we went in for supplies. He looked up as we passed, eyes narrowing, and for a moment I thought he'd walk over. But he didn't. Just watched us from his booth, like he was trying to decide whether I was worth the next move. That night I sat by the stove and thought about the difference between avoiding someone and preparing for them. Avoidance keeps you moving. Preparation lets you stand still without being a target. I decided I was done moving. 2 days after the near miss, the weather turned. A heavy wet snow fell for hours, muffling the world until even the lake seemed to be holding its breath. I spent the morning mending a tear in my old flannel, the kind of quiet work that makes time slow to something you can manage. Around noon, tires crunched up the drive. No warning from Lyle this time. I stepped to the window and saw Adam's rental, snow clinging to its wheel wells. He got out without hesitation, jacket zipped to his chin, boots sinking deep into the drift. I opened the door before he could knock. "You made it," I said. "Not hard when you're not hiding," he said. "Not hiding," I said. "Just living somewhere you didn't think to look first." He stepped inside without waiting to be invited, stamping snow from his boots. His eyes scanned the cabin, taking in the stove, the duffel by the desk, the map on the wall. "Nice place," he said finally. "How long were you planning to keep it from us?" I sat down at the table. "From you, not from us. There's a difference." He stayed standing, hands in his pockets. "You could have told me. We could have made a plan. Sold this, sold the house back in Ohio, split the money. Everyone wins." "I don't measure winning in transactions," I said. "You measure it in secrets?" "In boundaries," I said. He laughed once, no humor in it. "You sound just like Mom. Always thought the rules didn't apply to her if they were inconvenient." The words landed hard, but I didn't let him see it. She believed some rules were made by people who didn't have to live with the consequences. I agree with her. Adam walked to the window, looked out at the lake. "You can't stay here forever. Eventually, someone's going to need to decide what to do with that house." "I've already decided," I said, "and so has the county recorder's office." He turned back to me. "So you're just, what, going to hole up out here until you die?" "No," I said. "I'm going to live out here until I'm done. Then I'll decide the next place." And it'll be my decision, Adam, not yours. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Frustration, yes, but also something softer, almost like understanding. It was gone before I could name it. He walked to the door, hand on the knob. You're making a mistake. Better mine than yours, I said. He left without slamming the door. The snow swallowed the sound of his car before I'd even finished my coffee. The morning after Adam left, the lake thawed just enough to show black water between plates of ice. Lyle said it meant spring would come early this year. I wasn't so sure. Montana doesn't take orders from calendars. I spent the day in quiet work, splitting the last of the winter logs, oiling the hinges on the shed door, sweeping the porch free of snow that would melt on its own in a week. By evening, the cabin smelled like cedar and fresh coffee. That's when the phone rang. It wasn't Adam. It was Claire. Dad, I'm here. I talked to Adam. He's Adam. But I think he understands you're not coming back just because he thinks it's time. That's a start, I said. She hesitated. I'm not going to lie. I wish you were closer. But I get it. Mom would have loved this place. She built it for us, I said. Not for a vacation, for a choice. We talked for 20 minutes about Jack's classes, her new garden, and the dog she swears is part wolf, but looks like it would lose a fight with a squirrel. Not once did she mention the house. After we hung up, I walked to the desk, opened Marianne's folder, and took out the deed. I'd already filed the paperwork to move the cabin into my name. I also left a sealed envelope in Lyle's safe, a letter explaining my wishes for both properties, clear enough that no one could reinterpret them later. That night, I stepped outside. The stars over the lake were sharp enough to cut your hands if you reached for them. I thought about the first weeks after Marianne died, how the house back in Ohio had felt like it was closing in, how Adam and Claire's voices had filled every empty room with their plans. Now, the only plan was mine. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, on land Marianne had chosen, in a life she'd left me room to grow into. The cabin creaked in the wind, the stove glowed through the window, and for the first time in months, my chest felt light. Still a wee, I said into the night. The lake held the words, then let them go.